You know what would be a really strange decision for an entertainment company to make? To host a streaming exclusive TV show from and about a country that service is not available in. Wouldn't that just be weird, Jack?
Drink up, me hearties, yo-ho.
Well said. ī.wá.d is the newest cartoon on Disney+, at least at the time of writing the script. It's a story about wealth inequality, family conflict, personal growth, and a robot lizard, all set in Lagos. Wait, Lagos?
You like it?
Definitely.
It's agege bread. But this one is just okay. The best comes from Ajegunle.
Okay, Super Team 4 felt familiar. Hearing the main character of a futuristic cartoon on Disney Plus talking about wanting to visit a place so close to where I grew up in is just weird. Her father is absolutely right though. Mild spoilers going forward. This video is made to recommend the show, so I'm not gonna tell you too much about the plot. Though there is some analysis in here for those who have seen it, so don't just go away yet. ī.wá.d is honestly a pretty good story, and I think it would be a crime for it to fly under the radar like other African animated shows. So the fact I only found out it existed because a YouTuber I barely watch wanted to talk about the trailer does not bode well. So consider this your recommendation from me. How regularly you check up on my content is up to you. Let's hope enough people from countries with Disney Plus and people with VPNs in other countries like it. Or they do the smart thing and put it on Disney Channel here in Nigeria. I cannot understate how baffled I am by this series of decisions, even if I'm happy the story is on such a large platform. ī.wá.d is really a tale of two cities, the mainland and the island. The island is where the rich people live. And if you've seen a TV show before, you're probably constructing an idea about the show based on what I just said. The story is set in Lagos, but if you boil it down, it's pretty universal. But before we get to that, we should address the major change between this show and the reality of Lagos. Afro-futurism. After all, ī.wá.d is a Yoruba word that means front-facing, or more accurately to what the show's going for, the future. Not gonna lie, Afrofuturism is kind of a weird concept. It's basically science fiction that's identifiable as coming from Africa by its aesthetics, and in the case of TV shows like Kizazi Moto, which you should check out, even the themes and story conventions. Afrofuturism basically goes out of its way to make sure you know its origins. Usually it's an aesthetic thing. At worst, it can lead to weird design choices for the sake of looking African. At best, it could honestly improve what we're looking at. Take street hawkers using drones to sell their wares. I can believe that. The thing I find hard to believe is that they'd sell it to people in flying cars because, as far as I know, the entire concept kind of relies on traffic that doesn't exist while you're flying. Like, are all the cars that engaged flight mode to avoid traffic just gliding really slowly so they can buy plantain chips? Okay, you know what? Honestly, I can kind of believe that. But that's like the most egregious examples. In most cases, the show kind of falls on the aesthetics alignment. But the Afrofuturism serves two purposes. Well, really three. One of them is, like I said, to give the show an aesthetic identity. Besides that, the reasons are to give the main kid characters an advantage when taking on adults, and to emphasize the differences between the island and the mainland. The island has robot servants. The mainland still experiences power outages because we as a people cannot fucking escape from them. The show has a very economic use of its characters, as each one essentially represents some aspect of the theme in building its conflicts, doing its best to create a more nuanced look at the idea of wealth inequality. And those characters spend enough time interacting with each other to really bring out the best in them. However, between its short runtime and the ultimate focus on one story, solutions to that inequality aren't really meant to be a focus beyond implications for the future. And I think that works to the show's advantage, even if it threatens to leave the viewer feeling a bit unfulfilled. This isn't really a story about fighting inequality so much as it is a story in a world with inequality. You know, I was just complaining about 8-episode seasons and Disney had to drop a 6-episode show on us. At least in this case, I can believe that's what the writers were going for, and not just because besides the first episode, each one is named after a main character. But that's enough dragging things out. Let's actually talk about those characters. Starting with the two characters who are meant to most represent the mainland. The villain, Bode, and the protagonist, Kole, who have a lot in common, having to work for wealthy families as kids in order to survive because of their economic situations. Bode, however, lets his resentment of the wealth of his employers infect his already negative habits, turning him into a man who feels entitled to take from others, even if he has to kidnap their children first. Kole, by contrast, remains a lot more hopeful. And tellingly, the now adult Bode uses his own money and power to influence, control, and threaten people like Kole. On the island, we have the Martins family. Tunde Martins was once a mainlander and grew up in Ajegunle, but due to his genius, he was able to move up in the world. But as he did, he refused to look back at where he came from. His daughter, Tola Martins, is really curious about the world her father came from and the rest of Lagos she's so unfamiliar with. This results in Tunde being overbearing and honestly pretty cruel, even if he believes he has good reasons for what he does. Tola is honestly more interesting than I thought she would be. She's a nice young girl who wants to get to know her often absent father more, be it by hanging out with him or finding out more about how he lived. And considering Kole is unironically the closest person to the man that she knows, their friendship makes sense. While in story they acknowledge the idea that she's a rich girl who wants more with the very Disney princess motivation of wanting to see the outside world, her relationship with her father goes a long way to explain her motivations and what she actually wants out of life. As much as a 10-year-old can want something out of life anyway. On top of that, she clearly has a deceptive streak to her and is capable of using people's perception of her to her advantage, as people tend to underestimate the Ajibota 10-year-old girl. In case you're wondering, Ajibota basically means pampered.
I'd give the clothes off Benito's back if you really needed that.
And rounding out the main cast whose names make up the episode titles is Hudson, the Agama lizard mascot of the show. An artificially intelligent robot designed to protect children that's given to Tola. She's both a cute sidekick and a representation of the technology that allows the main characters to stand a fighting chance against the bad guys. But she's written with just enough weaknesses to not take over the story. Our focus is squarely on the human characters, especially Tola and Kole. If I'm being perfectly honest, Hudson doesn't really have that much of a character. She has some, just not that much, especially compared to everyone else. Stories like this need to tread carefully in the way they treat the conflict, especially if they want to avoid dehumanizing one side. But while Bode is ultimately the villain of the story, Tunde has his own set of flaws that, while not as criminal, makes it clear the story is well aware of nuances in its conflict and what's really exacerbating the inequality that's kind of keeping the story going.
Come, make you tell me, did you change the world? Or just the island?
And that leaves the two innocent kids who get pushed around by the environment they were born in and pushed away by the one they were not. And the story is well aware that Kole objectively has it worse, while not discounting Tola's feelings. Issues with Bode's criminal operation aside, I think the story is really well written and the characters are the best aspect of that, with a lot of parallels between certain characters that emphasize how similar they are and how different individual personality traits or circumstances can differentiate them. The fact that every main character gets to have at least one sort of one-on-one conversation with every other main character makes for great contrast and conversations. If this video does well, I'd actually love to do a follow-up going more in depth on this. The supporting cast is less irreplaceable to the plot, but function pretty well in what they are supposed to do. From the sick mother motivating her son, to the comic relief bruiser villain, to Tunde's overbearing boss, who, besides Tola, might be the only important character born an islander. Okay, I just realized we never actually get a mention of Tola's mom. I assume she's in the great Disney mom club in the sky. As for the animated aspects of the show, I think the 3D animation is pretty good, from the facial expressions to animating Otin's movements. That being said, one thing did bother me: the children's eyes and how big they are, especially on Tola, who I can easily describe as the epitome of wide-eyed innocence. Don't look directly at it. Lagos is represented pretty well, all things considered. It's not super accurate to my memory, but I suppose it really shouldn't be if we're in the future. I think the show might give you the impression all the wealthy people in Lagos live on the island, and not really. I seriously doubt Kole couldn't get a job closer to home, though it might not pay as much. Honestly, one of the more confusing things in the series to me is that Kole doesn't live in the Martins boys' quarters and that he seemingly goes back home every day. Has the cost of transportation improved that much? Have you seen the show? What did you think of it and this video? Did I make you want to check it out? Tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thank you and good day.